Okay, we're continuing with this book here, The Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. We're on the letter G. We're going in alphabetical order. Oliver Goldsmith lived from 1728 to 1774. He said, true wisdom consists in tracing effects to their causes. Yeah, and I talked about that in my recent video on knowledge management systems. A real expert knows what causes what in their field. That's valuable information, because if you know what causes what, you can prevent it from causing something you don't want caused. Laws grind the poor, rich men rule the law. Yeah, that's pretty much how it goes. Sadly, the law is basically written to protect rich people. It's not written to help poor people. A book may be very amusing with numerous errors, or it may be very dull without a single absurdity. Yeah, that's a typical thing you'll see. A book written by a university, medical school professor with a big name publisher. There won't be a single grammatical error in the whole book, but it'll be a piece of crap that's worthless with no useful information to help a patient. Okay, then I'll write this brilliant book that'll actually really help the patient, help the young people understand much better than anything in a conventional textbook. And I'll get a couple bad reviews saying this book sucks. There was a typo on page 27. There was a misspelling on page 52. And it's just like, yeah, pal, did you actually pay attention to what the thoughts were? But that's life. Okay. If one wishes to become rich, one must appear rich. Yeah, it helps a lot to look the part. First of all, rich people are scared of regular thugs from the street. So unless a person's dressed nice, they just assume he's probably a thug. And I remember when I was at Stanford, and I would go to parties, and not that I didn't go to that many parties. There weren't very many parties, but I noticed something. I hung around with all these guys who were really good athletes, like All-Americans, future professional athletes, and most of us didn't have girlfriends. And we just wore T-shirts. And then I would go to some of the fraternities where all the guys dressed really nice. All the shirt would have a collar, sometimes that little alligator eyes on. They wouldn't wear gym shoes, sneakers. They would wear, those penny loafers or something. And they would have really nice girlfriends. We're like, man, I think it's because we look poor. So I've learned later in life, you got to dress nice. People they form their impression on you based on how you're dressed, so it's worth it to dress nice. Samuel Gompers lived 1850 to 1924. He said, freedom of speech and freedom of the press have not been granted to people in order that they can say things which please and which are based upon accepted thought, but to have the right to say things which displease. Yeah, you should be able to say things which are offensive. That's the purpose of free speech, If somebody writes an offensive comment, you can delete the comment, but they should be allowed to say stuff. Give them a chance. It's better to have people with secret identities saying bullshit and still get some useful opinions than to not have it at all, so you don't know who they are. Free speech is a valuable thing for society, because we run into a lot of political correctness whereby if you make a video that's not exactly what the video site wants, they'll delete your video or they'll get you in trouble. So they force you to not talk about things they don't want you to talk about. There's a lot of censorship in that way. And that's the benefit of going to other channels too. But the problem is I don't have time to go to other channels. I'd love to, but I don't have time. Probably Rumble's the next best channel that I've seen. But the other one's got potential. Jane Goodall, what makes us human, I think, is the ability to ask questions, a consequence of our sophisticated spoken language. Yeah, so, but Jane Goodall, she's kind of like saying we're a talking ape. We're a lot more than that, okay? I like G.K. Chesterton, and he said, art is a signature of man. You go to the most primitive man, and you'll see art in the cave, all right? And what I would say is, the Christians make the best art, so the Christians are the best civilization. That's true. Go ahead, challenge it. Show me the art from any culture other than the Christians that's even 1/10 of 1/10 of 1/10 of 1% as good as Christian art. And what else do men do? Educated men, they write. And the great thing about writing, you can't say something. A dead guy can't say anything, but a dead guy can write a book, and then the next generation can read the book, and we all learn from them. I've learned a lot from dead writers. I learned a lot from what I've read about the ancient Greeks, about the ancient Romans, about the Renaissance, about the Catholic Revival, Victorian Renaissance in the 1800s, and a lot of other things. We learn a lot from reading books. Only educated men can do that, pass things along to the next generation. Arthur Schopenhauer had said it too. Most knowledge is in books. No one person can hold that much of it in their head. The only way to pass knowledge from generation to generation is through a library. And I think the internet's very dangerous because whoever's in charge of the internet, they just delete stuff they don't want. So If somebody talks about the greatness of Christianity, Christian art, they can just delete all the Christian art off the internet. So it's nice to have it in a book, because if there's a bunch of books in a bunch of different locations, like when the Irish saved civilization, the book of Thomas Cahill, those manuscripts can live on and hopefully preserve civilization. Laughter is characteristic of humans. Other animals don't tell jokes. We have a lot more forethought. We can look into the future. We can plan. We can delay gratification and achieve great things. We have the ability to cooperate and work together better than other animals on a large, complex scale. Yes, ants cooperate and so do bees, but they can't cooperate in the complex manner that we do. We have religion. We bury our dead. We use our hands to build all kinds of fancy things, much fancier than any other animal could do. So we are much better than them. We are created in the image of God. Animals are just animals. Even the so-called smart chimp has a brain. Our brain's like 3 times bigger than theirs, okay? Give me a break. I don't think we are that related to chimps. I think that's totally exaggerated for promoting atheism. Terry Goodkind, the writer, born in 1948, he says, admitting you don't know something is the first step to learning. You have to admit you don't know it, and then you also have to say, but it's probably possible to learn it. Because a lot of people say, oh, nutrition is hopeless, all the experts contradict themselves, or they think they already know it because they were fine when they ate the same thing when they were younger. They're just getting older. That's why they're fat, sick, and stupid. No, it's because that's not a good long-term dietary plan. Okay, continuing on here with Terry Goodkind. He says, we can only do the best we can based on what we know. That's why the truth is important. Yeah, and that's why it's important to tell the proles the truth so they have a chance to make better decisions. That's all you've got to work with. Terry Goodkind. The mice think they are right, but the cats eat them anyways. That's how I feel. A lot of people think, oh, wouldn't it be so great to be as smart as me? Let me tell you something. It sucks a lot, okay? It sucks because, number one, nobody listens to me. Number two, like the way my old wife would win, like 95% of the arguments, she'd just go, you're autistic, you're not reasonable. And I'm like, what? That's like a response? I would always be right factually, but she would just say, you're autistic, that's not reasonable. And then it was like most of the family, we live right next to her family, so I would just get outnumbered. Well, your mother-in-law agrees with me, my sister agrees with me, my cousin agrees with me. And it's like everybody agreed with her just because they want to take her side. And I'd be like outvoted 5-1, even though I'd be 100% right. That's what it's like to be smart, okay? That happens all day, every day. So what happens with smart people is they become kind of quiet because they know that the game's not based on logic, you know? It's not like an Aristotelian society, okay? It's more like, I forgot that guy, but he said arguments aren't won by logic. They're won usually by who can generate more support emotionally. Okay, Terry Goodkind. It does the sheep no good to preach a diet of grass if the wolves are of a different mind. Yep, like in Athens and Milos. If you only read one thing about ancient Greece, read about what happened to the Melians. Terry Goodkind. Reality is irrelevant. Perception is everything. That is also true. People are going to go by what they perceive. The truth of what you know, that doesn't really matter to them until they pay the price, 40 years later, 30 years later. Terry Goodkind, if you care about yourself, you'll care about learning. Okay, yeah, because then you make your life better. You make the most of your opportunity. Self-respect has to be earned. Yep, that's like Schopenhauer. Try to have a heroic life. Do the best you can to achieve what you think you should do, and then you'll respect yourself for having tried. Then you'll like yourself because you know you tried. Terry Goodkind, most people are so stupid, given proper motivation, they'll believe anything. Yeah, that's true, because, I'm old now, I'm in my 60s, and what I've seen is people will believe one way on the subject, then they'll go 180 on the subject, then they'll come back 180. So the average person really doesn't often form their own beliefs. They just look at what a popular person says, and that's why you can trick the public into anything, and that's led to the destruction of the family, destruction of marriage, destruction of a whole bunch of other stuff in society. So, I pray and hope America will make a comeback, but it's been sinking pretty low for a while, but it's still possible to turn it around. I hope America turns things around.